There was a time when the world believed the Smith family had it all. They smiled on red carpets, laughed in interviews, and preached love, discipline, and authenticity. But behind that carefully crafted image, something was quietly unraveling. What the cameras showed was perfection. What they hid was pressure, pride, and pain. The story of Will Smith and his family is not just about fame. It is about how fame can turn a family portrait into a public tragedy. From West Philadelphia dreams to Hollywood collapse. This is the rise and ruin of a dynasty that thought it could outshine its own humanity. When Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith first appeared together in public, they radiated the kind of confidence only true power couples have. What was the unstoppable force of Hollywood? Charming, bankable, beloved by every generation. Jada was his equal in charisma, known for her strength, beauty, and intellect. Their children, Jaden and Willow, were born into that spotlight, groomed to inherit the family legacy. The Smiths seemed to have discovered the formula for a perfect life: talent, unity, and love wrapped in Hollywood gold. As cameras flashed and journalists wrote about their model marriage, the family became a symbol of success. Their mansion in Calabasas became a fortress of glamour. The press called them Hollywood's first family, and fans believed every headline. But behind those perfect smiles were expectations that no human could maintain. Will had built his life around control and image, and that image was now a brand. The Smith name was no longer just a family. It was an empire, the kind that demands constant performance, even at home. Long before the luxury and fame, there was struggle. Will's story began on the streets of West Philadelphia, where a young boy with a dream faced a world that did not make success easy. His early fame as the Fresh Prince came fast, and just as quickly, it fell apart. IRS debts swallowed his earnings. Fame had turned him into a target, recognizable but broke. Imagine being famous enough to be stopped on the street, but not wealthy enough to afford the car you were recognized from. That was Will's life before his second chance. When Quincy Jones invited him to audition for a new sitcom, Will had nothing left to lose. That moment, sweaty palms, trembling voice, and all, changed everything. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air turned him into a cultural icon. From there, his rise was meteoric. Each role, Bad Boys, Independence Day, Men in Black, carved his name deeper into Hollywood stone. But with every box office win, Will was crafting something else, a mask. A version of himself that the world adored because it was clean, confident, and endlessly smiling. That mask would one day betray him. In the 1990s, Will Smith was untouchable. Every movie he touched turned to gold. He was the man who could make America laugh, cry, and cheer all in one scene. His music echoed that same energy, safe, positive, and universal. Parents trusted him. Kids wanted to be him. He refused to curse in his raps because he believed intelligence didn't need profanity. But that choice also created distance. The same positivity that won over families alienated him from the darker, more authentic corners of hip-hop. Artists like Eminem saw his clean image as fake, a performance. Behind the scenes, Will began to feel that rejection. Hollywood loved him, but the streets never accepted him. To many, he was a superstar without roots. Still, the world saw only his smile, his laughter, his confidence. They didn't see the perfectionist who pushed himself until his joy was mechanical. Every success came with a silent cost, the need to be perfect, to never break, to never show weakness. A man who could conquer the world but not his own reflection. For years, the world saw a man who had it all. But the truth was darker. Will Smith, the global icon, was a creation, a shield built to protect the boy who had once felt powerless. His smile was armor. His charm was camouflage. Inside, he carried the echoes of a childhood marked by violence and fear. In interviews, he would later confess that he had spent his entire life trying to make people laugh because he could not bear to see anyone angry. He thought if he could control the room, he could control the pain. But even in success, that pain grew louder. He envied Tupac, the man who had Jada's respect in ways he never could. He admitted he was jealous of their connection, that he couldn't even speak to Pac when they shared a room. The perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect man, haunted by comparison. What began as a strategy for survival became a prison. The world loved the Fresh Prince, but Will had forgotten how to be himself. And when pressure finally met pride, that mask shattered for everyone to see. The night of the 2022 Oscars was supposed to be his redemption. Will Smith, after decades of dedication, would finally claim his first Academy Award. But instead of triumph, the night ended in chaos. As Chris Rock joked about Jada's shaved head, the room laughed. Will didn't. Something inside him broke. He stood, walked to the stage, and the sound of his hand striking Rock's face echoed louder than any applause that night. It was not just a slap. It was the destruction of an empire in one impulsive act. The crowd froze. Millions watching at home stared in disbelief. A man once known for his calm, family-friendly image had lost control in front of the entire world. When he shouted, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth," it was not just anger. It was years of humiliation, resentment, and bottled pain bursting free. But the world saw only violence. Within hours, his reputation crumbled. The Academy banned him. Studios cut ties. Friends fell silent. The man who once had the world's admiration now carried its pity. And the tragedy was that the man who had always been afraid of losing control finally did, in the worst possible way. After the Oscars night, silence filled the Smith mansion. It was not the silence of peace, but the heavy kind, the kind that follows an explosion. Every member of the family felt the tremors. The image that had taken decades to build was shattered in seconds. What once looked like unity now resembled fragments of a broken mirror, each reflecting a different truth. Hollywood watched, the public judged, and the family stood exposed. This was no longer a story about fame. It was about identity, betrayal, and survival in a world that feeds on spectacled in the months after the incident. Will Smith vanished from public view. The man who had once dominated every screen suddenly disappeared behind closed doors. Then, slowly, he began to re-emerge. His team crafted a plan for redemption, carefully filmed apologies, reflective interviews, and a social media return filled with calm and contrition. But something about it all felt unnatural. The smiles were thinner, the words more rehearsed. He spoke of healing and growth, but his eyes told another story: exhaustion. Every post, every public appearance, became a test. Would people forgive him? Could he still be the global hero he once was? The answer never came. For the first time, his charisma was not enough. Online comments turned brutal. Old fans turned distant. He had become a symbol of lost control, a warning about the dangers of image over authenticity. Behind the scenes, Will's attempts to rebuild his brand clashed with reality. Movie deals were frozen and industry trust evaporated. Redemption, once his specialty, was now out of reach. In trying to reinvent himself, he realized the hardest truth of all: you cannot rebuild what the world no longer believes in. While Will withdrew, Jada did the opposite. She spoke, and she kept speaking. On her show, Red Table Talk, she turned private pain into public dialogue. At first, it seemed empowering. But soon, every confession became a headline, and every headline became another blow to Will's dignity. When she spoke about her entanglement with August Alsina, the world froze. The word itself became a symbol of betrayal disguised as honesty. Will sat across from her in that now infamous episode, eyes red, smile forced, trying to understand how their private wounds had become a public exhibition. The internet turned their marriage into a meme. The same people who once praised their openness now mocked them. Every clip from that show was dissected, replayed, and ridiculed. It was not just gossip, it was a cultural spectacle, and Jada stood at its center. While she claimed authenticity, many saw cruelty. Her book interviews deepened the damage. Revelations about separation, about still loving Tupac, about not needing marriage at all. The more she spoke, the more Will seemed to fade. What was once their story became her story, and the public began to wonder if Will Smith, the man who once ruled Hollywood, had become a ghost in his own marriage. When Jada released her memoir, it was supposed to reclaim her truth. Instead, it reopened every wound. The book revealed private details: the separation from Will years before the Oscars, her deep connection to Tupac, and the emotional distance that had grown inside their marriage. It read less like healing and more like exposure. Fans who once admired her for strength now questioned her intentions. Even those sympathetic to her pain felt she had crossed a line. Will, meanwhile, stayed silent. His public image could not survive another storm. He appeared at events smiling, but the light behind that smile was gone. The man who once embodied control now seemed lost in uncertainty. Hollywood insiders whispered that his career was unrecoverable. Directors hesitated to cast him. Every move felt like damage control. The world that once celebrated the Smiths as a modern royal family now treated them as a cautionary tale. How too much transparency can destroy mystery, and how turning your pain into content can cost you your soul. Their parents' chaos filled the headlines. Jaden and Willow tried to find their own identities. Both were prodigies, raised to be fearless, creative, and independent. But growing up under such relentless attention had left scars. Jaden's music carried undertones of rebellion and confusion, while Willow's voice echoed maturity beyond her years, often expressing loneliness masked as strength. They each spoke about mental health and the cost of fame, but their honesty revealed something deeper, a longing to escape the very world that had raised them. The Smith children became mirrors of their parents' contradictions. They sought individuality, but were forever linked to the family's legacy. Jaden once admitted he wanted to move out at 15. Willow confessed she had questioned her purpose after fame came too fast. Their art became their therapy, but their pain became entertainment for the public. In the shadows of their parents' downfall, they were left to redefine what the Smith name meant, not as a symbol of power, but of survival. The Hollywood dynasty had cracked, and its heirs were left standing in the rubble, trying to make sense of a story they never asked to inherit. By the time the dust settled, one truth remained. The Smiths had given the world everything. Their laughter, their tears, their secrets. And in return, the world consumed them. What began as inspiration had turned into obsession. The family that once stood as an example of perfection had become a mirror reflecting the cost of living without privacy. We'll learn that success cannot protect you from yourself. Jada learned that honesty without empathy can wound deeper than silence. Their children learned that legacy is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a weight. Years later, when people look back on the Smith era, they will not remember just the movies or the music. They will remember the lessons hidden between the headlines. That fame without boundaries devours those who chase it. That love without trust collapses under pressure. And that even the most powerful families can crumble when truth becomes performance. The Smith story is not just about one man's downfall. It is about the quiet destruction that happens when the spotlight never turns off. And how, sometimes, the greatest tragedy is simply being seen too clearly.